On Health Her Way, we're asking the questions you want answered about your body.
Together with our female healthcare experts, we're diving into the questions that might seem too scary, too silly, trivial, or taboo. No topic is off limits.
Join us as we talk about Health Her Way.
Welcome to Health Her Way. I'm Meredith Cunningham.
And I'm Brooklyn Elbert, and today we're joined with Kara Pepper again. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's our senior mental health counselor at Covenant Children's, specializing in supporting women and families with babies in the NICU. She works to provide essential emotional support and therapy regarding a variety of issues and concerns.
We are going to have Kara on the show all the time because of the wonderful, great knowledge that she has and the variety of topics that we're going to cover, which today's topic is a little different.
Yeah.
We'll call it different.
Yeah.
So we wanted to kind of talk about how your brain and your mental health impacts your physical relationships, specifically when it comes to intimacy.
Yeah.
But we want to kind of like upfront give a disclaimer about who the majority of this topic is going to like focus on while it does apply to everybody else.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that are going to be broad strokes that apply to everybody here, but we just want to be upfront that most of the research that I'm talking based on is based on long-term relationships in heterosexual couples. So we just want to be very open about that.
Okay. So our first question, how does mental health affect women's experiences of physical intimacy in relationships?
Oh my gosh, this is such a can of worms, honestly, because mental health and just our relationships in general play a huge role in how we experience physical intimacy, whether that's just touch or actually sex itself. So when we have depression, let's use that as an example, we oftentimes have decreased libido. We have increased irritability, which sometimes means, especially if we've got young kids around, we're touched out. We're actually overstimulated by the physical touch. And so it plays a huge role how we're doing mentally in the health of our sex life and our physical life.
Has everybody done the love language 5 tests? If you haven't, it's really interesting. You should go take the quiz. One of mine is physical touch, and I am definitely all the time touching somebody or something. I'm a big hugger until I had a toddler. And then don't you dare. Even my dog would come and sit next to me and be like, no, go away. But it's so real. And it makes me actually feel bad for those people who do not like physical touch that I keep trying to hug because they're probably feeling the same way that I feel at that moment. But you're right. Like having kids who need you physically all day long, by the time that he goes to bed, please, nobody else even look at me.
Yeah. And, let's talk mental health meds even. One of the side effects of a lot of them is vaginal dryness. So there's so many of these things going on. You can be trying to address your mental health and come up with a side effect that affects your sex life accidentally.
So beyond the physical aspect of irritability, sometimes kind of like we've talked about in the past, anxiety, you're just not in the headspace because you're worried about so many other things right now. So even if the physical part isn't an issue, it's just, does your head need to be in the right headspace for sex?
1000%. If you can't focus, you're not enjoying sex. And so when your mind's on the to-do list, on what went wrong at work, the toddler that needs you, XYZ, fill in the blank, you're likely not having a super positive sex experience.
Why is it important for us to have a sex life, especially if we are somebody in a long-term relationship? And obviously there's a need fulfillment for 2 people at that stage. But why do we need physical intimacy in our life?
Well, it's a bonding thing. It's a stress relief thing. It is part of that feeling connected to our partner, feeling confident in our relationship. So communication's important. Physical touch outside of sex is super important. And sex is important. I think a lot of times we try to brush that under the rug, and it's okay if you have a lower libido. It's okay if that's not a huge part of your relationship, but it's still there. That's a part of romantic relationships. And I think a lot of times we try to shove that under the rug out of embarrassment or out of fear of having some of these conversations.
You brought up a really good point, these conversations, and you talked about communication. I feel like that's already a struggle. And then it's probably even worse to have to kind of bring up like, well, this is the reason why I don't want to have sex with you tonight. Or it's not you, it's me, that's never a good conversation to have. So what is your tip to have those conversations with your partner?
Have those outside the bedroom is always my tip. So if you're in the heat of a sexual moment that's not gone well, we can do a little bit of troubleshooting in the moment, but we're probably both on edge. So we need to be in a calm headspace where we can both actually give each other the attention we deserve to have these sensitive conversations. I think a lot of times it's one of those things that we don't have conversations with our partner about. We just expect it to be natural and normal. No, that's just not realistic for most of us.
So, how can women maintain physical intimacy during significant life changes like pregnancy, postpartum, menopause, or just while managing a different life change?
Yeah, I think something that's super important is to be realistic. You don't necessarily maintain what physical intimacy looked like before when you're going through a life change, but you maintain the fact that you do have physical intimacy. Does that make sense? I think let's use pregnancy for an example. You have a baby, your body's recovering. Physical contact is still important, but it may not be sex. And menopause as well. We talked vaginal dryness earlier, all sorts of physical changes, not feeling as confident in your body. All of those things play a role. So a lot of times when I'm working with couples in particular, I'll talk to them about, okay, maybe we take the goal of orgasm off the table. Maybe it's more about our physical contact, our closeness, our time together, and then we add that back in. So that's one of my big things I work with couples on, because a lot of times it's about success. And when we have that mindset, there's too much pressure on both partners, the male and female, if we're talking a heterosexual couple. And that honestly makes sex a lot more difficult.
So, once you've reached that point, how can you start to rebuild and rekindle that
Yeah.
intimacy?
Let's be realistic. Sometimes we need to schedule. We have to schedule that physical intimacy so that it actually happens, so that we can kind of mentally prepare ourselves. Um, Date nights, those kind of things, building those routines back in. And we'll get back spontaneity. We will. That doesn't mean we're scheduling forever, but that's one of the big ways we bring that back in is we're talking about this happening and we're creating space for it.
We talked about love languages a second ago, and I know you're only supposed to have two, but I really do think I'm a big fan of all of them. Bring me gifts, tell me I'm wonderful, all the things. For somebody needy like myself who might feel a little bogged down by the scheduling and it takes out some of them, what are some of the things that we can do in the meantime to kind of put the romance back into it until we can get back to that spontaneity part of it?
Yeah. Build a culture of appreciation in your relationship. Tell your partner he's hot. Reach out physically. Tell yourself, I'm going to initiate physical contact once in the next couple of days. Those little things create those connections, which then create the sparks that make you want to get back into the actual physical intimacy.
So when you walk past him in the kitchen, smack that butt every
Yeah.
time. Hey, hottie.
Yeah.
Okay, those are good tips. Yeah. What are some signs, obviously maybe beyond the physical act not working well, that we are struggling? We've kind of talked about being a little touched out and things like that. How can we identify or maybe know our partners maybe having a hard time without them obviously communicating with us that they're having a hard time, that maybe we need to provide them with some more support?
Yeah. So I think there's several things. Everybody's going to express that a little bit differently. But one of the big ones is, are we more irritable with each other? Are we having more conflicts than normal? And that's kind of a two-way street. We can have more conflict because we're not having physical intimacy, or the lack of physical intimacy can be a symptom of the conflict. Am I noticing my partner being more stressed out than normal, short with me, those kind of things? That doesn't necessarily mean I'm guilty and I need to have more sex with my partner. And it means we need to have a conversation about what's going on.
I want to go back to the basics too for a second. Just because you're having, maybe pun included, a dry spell with your spouse does not mean that this is the end of the world. It does not mean you're going to break out. Like, for relationships, ebb and flow. And so these, like I said, dry spells are completely normal, right?
Absolutely. Frequency of physical intimacy, whether we're talking sex or not, is totally going to change throughout different seasons, and that's okay. That's normal. What's important is that you and your partner are communicating about these things, being open about the fact that it's there, and still loving each other, still giving each other that attention in ways that feel more appropriate for the moment. So it's totally normal to have a dry spell. Pun intended.
You gotta throw them in there every once in a while. Yeah, this is a punny podcast. I feel like the answer to this question is going to go back to everything you've said before, which is really going to be the root of it is communication. But I feel like, especially with us women, we have long memories. So if we've had maybe a past experience that didn't go so well, and maybe it's not even talking about something as heavy as like a physical injury or anything like
Yeah.
that, but even just like an embarrassing moment or something. If we've had one of these things, how do you move past that? How do you get in the headspace of like, no, I will only ever have sex with the lights completely off because one time something happened and it didn't end well? Or same thing, maybe I had somebody who did something I didn't like, but I didn't ever know how to tell them that, but I don't want this new person to do that. Like, so how, again, I think the answer is going to be, did I get it right? Is it communication?
It is. It's also having a sense of humor. So that's where it comes back to, for us as women, having a level of self-confidence. Because if something didn't go well the last time we had sex and I'm embarrassed about it, I'm going to be more timid. But if I have a sense of humor about it, it's a bonding moment for us. And so that's the difference. So I think being aware that sex is messy, it's a learning curve with every partner that you have, but also even with the same partner throughout time, I think that makes a huge difference. I think something else that really matters is it's normal for you to have a different libido from your partner. Like, that is a totally normal thing. It's completely rare for you and your partner to each want sex every time at the same time. And that's where the communication really does come in, and talking about when we do have sex, when we don't have sex, when I am okay with things being initiated, when I'm not. It's also important that the same person's not always initiating sex, because that creates a pattern where somebody's feeling rejected a lot and somebody's feeling burdened a lot. And if we can balance that back out, it'll help the sexual dynamic.
Well, and I think you've mentioned this, like, it's funny because you said like no one's ever going to be on the same exact schedule, you know? But it's different too. I think, especially for couples who've been together for a long term, what you were doing at 22 is not going to be the same that you're doing at 34, won't be the same at
No.
56 and so on, right?
No, absolutely. And I think that's in terms of frequency. That's in terms of the time you spend having sex. That's in terms of even getting off of sex, cuddling. Okay. When you're 22 and dating, you have time to lay down and cuddle with your partner and watch a movie, but maybe you're 35 and are chasing two toddlers and feel like you're passing ships in the night. And that is a season. It's a hard season, but it's real and it's normal.
So when it comes to our headspace and sex, I feel like we've talked a lot about communication with your partner, but if you're not in your own real headspace, like, I feel like you have to be honest with yourself about some of these things too. You can maybe sometimes we say, oh, we're not as tired, or fine, we'll just do it. Like, we'll power through. But that's not being honest with ourselves. That if we were really honest with ourselves, we'd be like, no, I'm not in the right headspace to do this today.
Yeah. And I think it's about giving yourself permission to not be in that headspace. And it's also about asking, where is physical intimacy a priority in my life? It's okay if it's not the biggest priority right now, but let's be honest about that and let's be real about that with ourselves. And if we feel like, okay, I want to make this more of a priority, then what do I need to do about that? Okay, do I need to create time to decompress when I come home from work so that way I don't feel like I'm a grouchy monster when I meet my partner, and then if we just devolves into chaos instead of intimacy? Things like that are super important to check in with ourselves about. That's why mental health ties into physical intimacy, because if I'm not taking care of my mental health, I'm not the best version of myself for me or for my partner.
Let's talk about the root of all evil real quick. Comparison.
Yes.
So not even with social media or movies or TV or whatever, but even just your friends that you have a girls' night with, and they're all talking about things that they're doing, their frequency. Oh, my partner's the most romantic. We do it all the time. Like, each couple is going to be different. And so we shouldn't really I mean, there are guidelines for things like you're saying, like we should definitely need these things in our lives, but we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to others, right?
Exactly. And I think I get some people that sit in my office and they're like, how often should we be having sex? The answer is, how often do you want to be having sex? For everybody, that's going to be different. And so that comparison game is dangerous because it makes us jealous, which then creates dissension within our friendships. But also when I'm mad at my partner for whatever it is around the physical intimacy, I'm actually less likely to go be physically intimate with them and get what I'm wanting. And so it's okay to feel those things. It's okay to recognize, I wish we had more of that. But then let's go address it rather than sitting in the bitterness of that.
A lot of us, especially those of us who have had kids and have a lot of physical and now mental changes and burdens, how can we politely ask our partner for more support? My husband is the best person in the world. Do not get me wrong. He constantly tells me, like, you're beautiful, things like that. But like, I don't want to be like, I'm even needier than that. I'm going to need you to tell me even more how, but everything is so different afterwards. So how can we ask for support in a way that I feel like we probably don't ever do properly, of like, probably just have a meltdown. I'm not pretty. I'm fat. I'm on my period. I don't want to do it, like, but what? That's not the right way to handle it in that heat of moment situation.
I've got a formula for you, actually.
Tell me.
I feel, because, so I need.
Okay.
So
I feel this way because of this, so I need this. Ooh.
That's good.
Yeah.
We'll put that in the caption, folks.
So that applies to way more than just physical intimacy, but that's a really safe way to bring things up. You're letting him know how you're feeling, but you're also giving him agency to do what you need. Because a lot of times I feel like our downfall as women is, I'm just this, but I don't know what I need. Okay, you're allowed to not know what you need, but then you also can't hold your partner accountable for meeting that need when you're not saying it. So I think sometimes even just flat out saying, so I don't know what I need. I'm sorry. Sorry on that. But this is where I'm at. I think that's really important communication to have. And then I think also some of it goes back to, do I like myself? Do I like this version of myself? And what do I need to do to actually like this version of myself? I'm not going to have the body I had when I was 20. And that's okay. But how do I first even become neutral about that body? And then how do I learn to love that body?
I think that's hard today because social media, there's this perfect image of what you should look like, who you should be.
Yeah.
So,
and the hard part is that changes. It's gone from the stick thin models of the 2000s now to the gym girl. It works out and is muscular and strong. And so I think that's where it's okay to have those aspirations, but it's also okay to be okay with not being that person. It doesn't mean you're unhealthy. It doesn't mean you're fat. It doesn't mean any of those kind of things. And it's learning how to have different beauty standards. Someone who is in a larger body doesn't mean they're not beautiful.
Do you think a lot of our problems in the bedroom come from like a physical lack of confidence?
I think for everybody that's different, but some of them do, for sure.
do you have any tips on how to work past that if you're experiencing it?
Yeah, I think the first thing is a lot of people skip that body neutrality step. They try to go straight towards, I need to love myself. And yes, eventually. But first, how do I learn to not be mad at myself? Because a lot of times I'm mad at myself for not having maintained that body, or I'm disappointed in where I'm at. And so first, how do I become neutral and okay with even looking at myself in a mirror? I'll have people practice. It's okay to walk by a mirror and look at yourself, because a lot of us, we feel disgust when we do that. But it's learning how would I talk to that friend that comes up and tells me I'm not feeling beautiful today. I'm not seeing the same thing she's seeing. I'm seeing how good of a person she is, how much she cares for people, how well she puts on makeup, whatever it is. And so how do I talk to myself in that way? And then I get to that self-love piece.
Because we always give people more grace than we give ourselves.
Mhm.
Yeah. We're our own worst critic.
Except for our husbands. They get no grace. actually saying that to be funny, but also like, sorry, honey, like you have a really high level of achievement standard that you've got to meet. So
Yeah, and I think that goes into physical intimacy too. A lot of times there's this whole pattern of withholding sex as punishment, and that's not a dynamic that serves us. Yes, you're allowed to not be interested in sex because of conflicts that are going on, but when you're using it as a manipulation tool, that usually becomes a problem.
okay, that's a good point.
Yeah.
You see all these things and like shows, like comedies will joke about it though, like, oh, no sex tonight, you're on the couch or whatever, da da da. But like, probably shouldn't be getting our love life advice from the TV, right?
That usually lands us in bad places.
Just this podcast. This is where you learn about it.
Listen to us. Some media is okay.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you think is important related specifically to this topic?
I think it goes back to something I might have mentioned earlier, but not all physical intimacy has to lead to sex. I think there's a lot of pressure sometimes in relationships in that specific context for, okay, we're cuddling, we're making out, it's going to lead somewhere. And that creates a lot of pressure that's not necessarily healthy. It's okay to have physical contact without sex.
Okay, I think it's time
Okay.
for the bowl.
For the trend?
The trending topic. Let's see what Carrie's going to talk about today.
Okay. Let's see. What do we have today? The trending topic, couples planning getaways. I feel like this was huge around the new year.
Okay, so let's talk about it. For those of you who don't know what this is, couples were posting about how they would do like a mini getaway, but it wasn't just for vacation. It was literally to like plan out upcoming trips and like kids' activities and just other obligations with work and things like that. So it was like a mix between like a getaway and also like a planning retreat. So how do you feel about that?
I'm a fan because it establishes a time when it's just you and your partner to have some of these conversations. But I think sometimes social media made it a little unattainable. Like, you don't have to go to a resort to have these conversations. And you can also have these conversations not at the beginning of the year. There's therapists John and Julie Gottman who established this thing called the 6 magic hours. And it's the idea that we have these times that we spend with our partner that are really important for the satisfaction of our relationship. And one of the pieces of those 6 magic hours is what they call a state of the union. And so it's kind of the same idea on a smaller scale, checking in, what's going well, what's not going well, what's the schedule, what do we need to work on. Planning sex could be part of that, or it could just be other practical things. Praising one another for those good things. I think doing it on that smaller scale might be more attainable than the big couples retreat. But if you can, go for it.
Any excuse for a trip,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Well, Kara, thank you so much for joining us today. As always, it's a pleasure to have you on, sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us.
Happy to be here.
Yes, and thank you to all of our listeners for joining today's episode. If you have a topic you want us to cover, you can find us on our socials, and we'll see you next time. This podcast explores health-related topics with experts in their specialty for entertainment purposes only.
The information shared and discussed should not be considered as medical advice under any circumstance and is not intended to replace professional medical advice.
The views expressed do not reflect the views of Covenant Health System. For questions related to your personal health, always contact your physician.